Have you ever stopped in the middle of your day and asked yourself, who is really creating my life? Not in the abstract sense of fate, destiny, or luck, but in the immediate, raw sense. Why is this moment the way it is? Why this body, this family, this struggle, this joy? Most people pass through life as if they were passengers on a bus driven by someone else. But here is the uncomfortable thought. There is no driver out there. The wheel is in your hands, even when you don't know you are steering. The ancient texts tried to tell us, though their language often feels wrapped in riddles. The prophets spoke of potters shaping clay, of blessings transferred from one son to another, of seeds that always reproduce according to their kind. Philosophers hinted that reality begins not in the material, but in the unseen. And modern thinkers, whether psychologists studying suggestion or advertisers designing campaigns, operate from the same unspoken truth. What the imagination holds, the world eventually mirrors. Yet, if this is true, why do most of us feel powerless? Why does life look random, chaotic, even cruel? The paradox is that the very power you've been searching for is the same power you've been unconsciously using against yourself. Every fear rehearsed, every scene of defeat replayed in the theater of the mind is a seed dropped in the soil of consciousness, and consciousness never forgets to harvest. Every skyscraper you've ever seen was first a private sketch in someone's mind. Every revolution that changed nations was first a fiery picture in someone's inner world. Even your breakfast this morning existed first in thought, the choice to cook or buy, to fast or indulge. Life is always built twice, first in the unseen, then in the visible. But here's the challenge. Most of us are building without noticing. We call it worry, daydreaming, rumination. We think it's harmless to replay conversations that hurt us or to silently narrate stories of what if everything goes wrong. Yet in those very moments, the clay is spinning on the wheel. A shape is forming, and eventually that shape becomes as solid as steel. So the real question is not whether you are creating. You are. The question is, what have you been shaping without realizing it? Why we distrust our own power. From childhood, we are taught to revere the outer world. The teacher points to facts in the textbook and says, "This is reality." The parent says, "Be practical, stop daydreaming." The news announces disasters as if they were cosmic truths and not carefully selected scripts. Slowly we absorb a silent command. Imagination is childish, unreliable, a toy to be put away. But notice the irony. The very society that tells you to distrust imagination spends billions to hijack it. Advertisements are not lectures of facts. They are moving images that plant desire. Political campaigns are not arguments. They are theater designed to stir your inner pictures. Even warnings about fear, wars, shortages, diseases are less about information and more about capturing the stage of your mind. If imagination were truly useless, no one would fight so hard to occupy it. The emotional trap. Here's where it gets tricky. Emotion is the water that makes these seeds grow. You might have a fleeting thought of failure and nothing happens. But if you feed it with feeling, fear in the stomach, tension in the chest, it roots deeply. That is why anxiety can feel so exhausting. It is not only thinking about the worst, but watering it daily with the intensity of your own body. And yet, the same principle works the other way. A moment of inner joy sustained with conviction plants a seed just as real. The image of yourself, healthy, loved, or free, held long enough with the feeling of "this is true," cannot remain invisible. It must harden into fact, even if the timing baffles the rational mind. The forgotten paradox. We live in a culture obsessed with how. How will I get that job? How will I meet that person? How will this money appear? The mind runs in circles because the path seems invisible. But here's the paradox. The path is invisible because it doesn't exist until you sustain the end state. You don't figure out the road before planting the seed. The seed creates the road as it grows. Think about it. Did the farmer ever control the specific rain cloud, the exact worm in the soil, the mysterious chemistry of sunlight? No. He only controlled the sowing. He trusted that the universe would reorganize itself around the seed. The same applies to your inner life. You don't need to strategize every detail. You need only to faithfully maintain the inner scene until the outer world organizes itself. A modern mirror. Consider how entire nations have shifted through this principle. A single narrative, repeated with conviction, becomes the lived reality of millions. Wars have been fought not because of bare facts, but because a story, crafted, broadcast, emotionally charged, was accepted by the collective imagination. This is not abstract philosophy. It is history written in blood and ink. On a smaller scale, think of personal lives ruined or saved by a single sustained assumption. A doctor once told a patient, "You have 3 months left." The patient believed it with every fiber of being and passed away right on schedule, even though later autopsy revealed no physical reason for such timing. Another patient, told she had a slim chance of recovery, refused to accept it. She pictured herself walking her daughter down the aisle, felt it as reality, and years later, that wedding photo sits framed in her home. Was it magic? No. It was the law of imagination expressed through biology, behavior, and synchronicity. Returning to the potter's house. So where do we begin? The ancient vision of the potter holds the key. The prophet was told to go down to the potter's house, to watch the clay reshaped on the spinning wheel. That story was not about pottery, it was about you. The clay is your experience. The wheel is your imagination, always moving. And the potter is the I am inside you that can reshape everything. Most of us only stare at the clay. We look at our bank account, our relationships, our health, and declare, "This is who I am." But the potter never discards the clay. He reshapes it. That is what you are invited to do. Not to deny reality, but to recognize that reality is clay, always flexible in the hands of imagination. Practical steps. Beginning the work. How do you actually do this without drifting into fantasy? The method is startlingly simple. Close your eyes to the outer noise. Construct a scene that would only be possible if your desire were already fulfilled. If you seek companionship, hear a friend congratulating you on the relationship. If you seek prosperity, feel the weight of money in your hand, or the relief of paying a bill with ease. If you seek health, sense the freedom of movement, the surprise of a doctor saying, "You're fine." But here is the key. Don't watch yourself as a distant character. Step into the scene. Look through your own eyes. Hear with your own ears. Touch with your own hands. Add just enough sensory detail that it begins to feel real, not perfect cinema, just believable. Then persist in it until a quiet certainty grows. When you open your eyes, the outer world will look unchanged. That is Esau, the current state. But you have already blessed Jacob, the inner state. And once blessed, it must remain blessed. Give it time. The harvest is certain. Why this feels difficult? The difficulty lies not in the method, but in our habits. We are addicted to reacting. We wake up and immediately check the phone, letting headlines or notifications plant seeds before we even breathe. We replay arguments, we feed doubts, we allow fear to parade unchecked. And then we call this being realistic. But realism is simply loyalty to Esau, the outer vessel. True realism is loyalty to the potter, the inner power. To sustain a mental image in contradiction to current facts feels uncomfortable at first, almost like lying. Yet it is the most honest act possible, because it acknowledges the deeper law. Consciousness precedes form. A gentle warning. There is no neutrality in this law. Ignorance does not excuse us from its operation. Just as gravity works whether or not you believe in it, the imagination creates whether or not you direct it. The question is not, am I creating? The question is, what am I creating by neglect? If you spend your days absorbed in fears, scarcity, and constant negative rehearsals, you are using the same divine power to build a prison. This is why so many people feel trapped. They are not victims of fate. They are victims of their own unconscious loyalty to images of defeat. The invitation. Here then is the invitation of part 1. Become aware of the potter at work. Stop staring only at the clay. Begin to notice the scenes you replay, the feelings you nourish, the private scripts you allow to run unchecked. Don't condemn yourself, simply notice. Awareness itself is the first reshaping. And then, even once today, step consciously into a new scene. Small, simple, believable. Let it carry just enough reality that you can feel it. Then let it go, like planting a seed in the soil. Do this, and you have already begun to reclaim the wheel of creation. Closing reflection. You are not a passenger. You are not clay alone. You are the potter's hand, the wheel, and the breath that spins it. The vessel of your life may seem fixed, but it is not. It is soft in the unseen realm, waiting for your touch. So I leave you with this question to carry into the quiet moments of your day. What vessel have I been shaping unconsciously? And what new form will I dare to shape now? Part 2. Hijacked Imagination. How Fear Shapes Collective Reality. Pause for a moment and think of the last time you scrolled through the news or social media. Maybe it was this morning. Maybe you just wanted a quick update. And within minutes, you were pulled into a storm. Wars in one corner of the world, economic collapse in another. A new disease, a new shortage, a new scandal. The mind absorbs these images, but rarely do we stop to ask, what is this doing to the theater of my imagination? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Fear sells because fear seeds. Every terrifying image that lingers in your mind becomes a small act of creation. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually woven into the texture of your daily life. And when millions of people sustain the same fearful images, those seeds sprout into collective reality. The hook. Propaganda is spiritual engineering. When governments wanted to prepare nations for war, they didn't just stockpile weapons. They stockpiled images. Posters of enemies lurking, speeches filled with imagined threats, films dramatizing invasion. Why? Because once the collective imagination is inflamed, the physical conflict is inevitable. This is not only politics. Advertising does the same with desire. You never needed the shiny car until you saw it framed against a mountain sunset, music swelling, the driver's face glowing with freedom. The car is real, but the story implanted in your imagination is what sells it. Your senses think, that could be me. The clay has been shaped. The modern world is not run by force alone. It is run by imaginal direction. Whoever captures what you picture inwardly holds more power than the one who controls physical resources, because eventually the physical bends to the imagined. Why fear works so easily. Why is fear so effective? Because it grips the body. When you hear of disaster, your heart rate quickens, your chest tightens. That emotion is like fertilizer to the seed. The fearful image roots deeply. Later, even without new headlines, your imagination keeps replaying the story. And with repetition, the fear becomes a silent assumption. The world is unsafe. Money is scarce. Disease is unavoidable. These assumptions might never be spoken, but they shape decisions. A person convinced of scarcity hesitates to take risks, even when opportunities are near. A person convinced of illness feels symptoms more intensely and recovers more slowly. A person convinced of danger sees threats where none exist. Fear doesn't only paralyze, it manufactures the evidence to prove itself right. The hidden cost of staying informed. How many times have you heard the phrase, "I just want to stay informed"? But what we call information is often carefully curated imagination fuel. The camera never shows the whole truth. It selects, angles, dramatizes, and then that fragment becomes the seed planted in your mind. Staying informed is not the issue. The issue is mistaking mental rehearsal of fear for wisdom. You think you're just reading, but in the background, you're rehearsing the collapse, picturing the violence, imagining the shortage. You are creating while you think you are observing. This is why entire societies can feel trapped in cycles of despair. A fearful narrative repeated daily becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Economies collapse not only because of numbers, but because millions imagine collapse and withdraw their trust. Conflict spreads not only because of weapons, but because both sides imagine the enemy as inhuman and irredeemable. The collective imagination is the most powerful force on Earth, yet it is rarely acknowledged. Instead, it is managed quietly through advertising budgets, political campaigns, entertainment, and even memes. The battlefield is your inner eye. A personal example. Think about your own life. Perhaps someone once told you, "People like you never succeed," or "Money doesn't grow on trees." At the time, it was just a phrase. But if it repeated enough, it took root. Without realizing it, you carried that seed into adulthood. Each failure seemed to confirm it. Each success felt temporary, fragile. Not because the statement was cosmic truth, but because your imagination replayed it until it hardened into reality. If one careless phrase could shape years of your life, imagine what entire industries pouring images into your mind daily can do. How to break free from hijacking. Here is where the transformation begins. You cannot stop the world from sending images. You cannot silence every headline or advertisement, but you can choose whether to feed them. The first step is awareness. Begin noticing the emotional pull of images. The next time you watch a video or read an article that stirs fear, pause. Ask, is this planting a seed I want to grow? Just that question interrupts the automatic process. It takes you out of passive absorption and reminds you of your role as potter. Second, practice selective fasting, not of food, but of inputs. Dedicate even one day each week where you avoid fear-based media. In that quiet space, notice how quickly your imagination begins to recover. You may find new ideas rising, new pictures forming, simply because the soil was no longer being filled with weeds. Third, plant deliberately. If fear-based propaganda can hijack your imagination through repetition, you can reclaim it the same way. Choose one small inner scene that represents freedom, abundance, or peace. Repeat it daily, gently, with feeling. It doesn't need to be grand. A handshake after receiving good news. A deep breath in a healthy body. A loved one smiling with relief. Over time, that repetition hardens into fact. Why doubt feels stronger. Doubt is nothing more than loyalty to the old images. You've replayed them so long that they feel more real than the new seed. The moment you imagine prosperity, doubt whispers, "But look at your bank account." The moment you imagine health, doubt says, "But feel your pain." Understand this: doubt is not proof, it is habit, and habits can be replaced. Every time you return to the chosen inner scene, even for seconds, you weaken the grip of the old picture. Slowly, the new image becomes the dominant assumption. Science echoes the ancient law. If all of this feels mystical, remember that even science has been circling this truth. Psychologists studying placebo effects have documented how patients heal when they believe a treatment is real, even when it is a sugar pill. Neuroscientists show that the brain cannot distinguish strongly imagined experiences from physical ones. The same neural circuits fire. Economists know that consumer confidence, essentially collective imagination, can crash or lift entire markets. The law is hiding in plain sight. Consciousness shapes reality, whether through neurons, hormones, social behavior, or sheer synchronicity. The unseen pictures always find a way to become seen. Taking back the wheel. Breaking free begins with a radical act. Stop outsourcing your imagination. Stop giving it away to headlines, to ads, to other people's fears. This doesn't mean living blind or careless. It means deciding that your inner stage is sacred ground, and only scenes you are willing to harvest belong there. Start small. Before sleep, replay one chosen scene. See it, feel it, let it lull you into rest. The moments before sleep are fertile. The soil is open. Do this nightly, and you will notice subtle shifts. Not miracles overnight, but coincidences, nudges, opportunities, outer clay beginning to reshape. A reflective story. There's an old parable of two monks. One said, "The world is falling apart." The other replied, "Then let us not fall apart with it." They both saw the same external events, but one surrendered imagination to fear, while the other chose to preserve inner harmony. Decades later, the fearful monk was still bitter, still waiting for collapse. The other, though living through the same events, was serene, loved, and quietly prosperous. What changed? Not the world. The potter's wheel turned the same for both. But one monk shaped despair, and the other shaped peace. Closing reflection for part 2. You live in a world that constantly competes for your imagination. Fear is the currency, but you are not condemned to spend it. You can withdraw at any moment and plant differently. The invitation is not to escape the world, but to stop being its unconscious co-creator. To reclaim the potter's house and say, "This clay is mine. I will not let others shape it without my consent." So here is your question to carry forward. Whose images have I been sustaining, and what will I choose to plant in their place? Part 3. The Faithful Gardener. Sustaining the scene until it becomes. We've now arrived at the most delicate stage of the journey. It's one thing to catch a glimpse of your power as the potter. It's another to recognize how fear and propaganda hijack your imagination. But the greatest challenge is persistence, because after you've planted a new image, the world doesn't change instantly. You open your eyes, and Esau, your current circumstances, is still standing there. And in that moment, the temptation is strong. To doubt, to give up, to call it fantasy. But here's the truth, whispered through every parable and every scripture. The harvest never comes the day you plant the seed. The harvest comes to the one who waits, waters, and tends, even while the field looks empty. The lie of immediate proof. We live in a culture addicted to immediacy. Click the button, get the answer. Swipe the card, receive the product. So when it comes to inner creation, we expect the same. I imagined prosperity yesterday. Why am I still broke today? I pictured health last week. Why does my body still ache? But inner reality doesn't operate by human deadlines. The seed must take root, unseen, before it breaks the surface. Doubt is the farmer digging up the soil every morning to check if the sprout is there. Faith is the farmer who waters daily, knowing the sprout is coming even when the ground looks bare. The emotional resistance. This is where most people falter. They construct a scene once or twice, maybe even for a few weeks. But when the outer evidence doesn't change quickly, frustration grows. They think it's not working. Yet the only thing not working is their persistence. Think of the gym. You don't expect a single workout to transform your body, but repeat the exercises faithfully and change is inevitable. The imagination is no different. Each repetition is a subtle weight lifted, a muscle strengthened, a neural pathway carved. What begins as fragile rehearsal becomes embodied conviction. And conviction is the signal that bends the external world. Faithfulness, not force. Persistence is not about gritting your teeth or forcing belief. It is more like loyalty in love. A lover doesn't need constant proof of affection to remain faithful. They return again and again because of devotion. In the same way, you return to your chosen inner scene not because outer proof demands it, but because you have chosen to be faithful. Even when doubts shout, even when facts scream the opposite, you gently return to the inner image. You wear it like a cloak, not frantically, but quietly. Over time, this quiet faith grows stronger than outer noise. The law of substitution. Here's a practical tool. Whenever doubt arises, and it will, don't fight it. Fighting gives it energy. Instead, substitute. Replace the fearful image with your chosen one, as simply as changing a channel. If you can't hold the full scene, hold a fragment. The sound of someone congratulating you, the touch of a hand, the weight of a ring. Small fragments are enough to shift the inner state. This practice works because consciousness cannot serve two masters at once. It cannot sustain both defeat and victory simultaneously. Each time you substitute, you weaken the old assumption and strengthen the new one. Extending the circle, creating for others. There is a deeper dimension here. The imagination doesn't stop with you, because the so-called other is not truly separate. Every person you encounter is part of the clay of your own consciousness, which means you can also shape lovingly for them. If a friend is ill, don't just send sympathy. Enter the inner stage and see them well. Hear them laughing, walking freely, speaking of recovery. If a child struggles, don't rehearse their failure. See them succeeding, smiling, confident. Hold that picture faithfully, and you plant a seed in the shared field of consciousness. This is not manipulation, because you are not forcing them against their will. You are simply holding the highest image of them, the one they themselves would choose if they knew their own power. Love always imagines nobly. The mystery of the collective garden. Think of what this means collectively. If millions can unconsciously sustain fear, creating wars and crises, then imagine what would happen if even a fraction sustained peace, abundance, or compassion with conviction. History has seen glimpses of this, periods of unexpected harmony, breakthroughs in rights, sudden cultural shifts. Beneath each of these, you will always find people who dared to imagine differently and remained faithful long enough for the clay of society to reshape. You don't need to wait for the world to join you. Begin in your own circle. Create for your family, your community, your friends. Hold images of well-being, dignity, and joy. Each seed contributes to the larger harvest. Why this works? Consciousness as the root. Skeptics will ask, but how can my private thought change someone else's reality? The answer is hidden in the nature of consciousness. Modern physics already whispers that everything is entangled, that particles across vast distances influence one another instantly. If matter itself is interwoven, how much more is consciousness, the field from which matter arises? When you hold an image of another person, you are not projecting from afar. You are shaping within the same field that they also inhabit. At a depth beyond appearances, you and they are one. This is why prayer, blessing, and loving thought have measurable effects across cultures and studies. The field is shared. The potter is one, experiencing through many. A personal experiment. Here is a practice you can try tonight. Think of one person you care for. Instead of worrying about them, construct a small scene of them thriving. Hear their voice telling you good news. See their face relaxed and joyful. Repeat it until you feel it as if it already happened. Then release it. Watch quietly in the coming days. Perhaps they call with unexpected progress. Perhaps their mood lifts. Perhaps circumstances shift in ways you could never have arranged. Don't rush. Don't demand. Simply observe the clay reshaping. This experiment teaches two things. First, that you can direct imagination for others. Second, that worry is not love. True love imagines the highest. Beyond power, discovering love. At this stage, something profound emerges. At first, you may approach imagination as power to change your finances, your health, your relationships. And yes, it is power. But the deeper revelation is that this power is also love. Why? Because love is giving life. To imagine for another's joy, to sustain a noble image for them, is the purest form of giving. You may never tell them, you may never be thanked, yet the act itself is love expressed through creation. And here is the paradox. When you use imagination in love, the harvest multiplies. Your own life shifts in ways you didn't plan, as if the universe itself rewards the one who creates for others, not as moral repayment, but as the natural overflow of the shared field. The final awakening. Even beyond love, there is the ultimate recognition. You are not only using God's power, you are God dreaming as human. The moment will come, as it did for mystics across centuries, when the veil lifts and you realize, I am the Father. This entire universe is my imagination, experienced as billions of selves. That recognition may sound distant now, but even a glimpse of it changes everything. It removes the last trace of victimhood. It reveals that every shadow, every struggle was self-imposed for the sake of experience, and that now, awake, you are free to create consciously. Practical guidance, faithful living. So how do you live this daily? Not by straining for perfection, but by gentle faithfulness. Morning. Before the noise of the day, choose one image to hold for a few moments. Let it set the tone. Daytime. When fear or doubt intrudes, don't fight. Substitute. Replace with your chosen fragment. Evening. Before sleep, replay the scene once more. Let it be the last impression your mind carries into the fertile soil of dreams. And for others, pick one person each week to imagine nobly for. Without telling them, sustain one simple scene of their joy or success. Notice how your own heart expands in the process. Closing reflection. You are the potter, the wheel, the clay, and the breath that spins it. The world outside is not fixed stone. It is soft, waiting to be reshaped by your inner fidelity. Fear may try to hijack it, doubt may try to erode it, but persistence carries the harvest. And love ensures that your creation does not end with you. The same power that shapes your life can shape the lives of those you cherish, because at the deepest level, they are not other. They are yourself seen from a different angle. So I leave you with the final question, one that echoes beyond this series. If every image you sustained would become fact, what would you dare to hold faithfully, not only for yourself, but for the world around you?